Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Season 2 of the Voices of Vayana podcast. Today, we have with us Mr. Prakash Dharmarajan, who is marketing advisor at Vayana and is a seasoned advertising professional with over 2 decades of experience in the industry.
Prakash has held various leadership positions throughout his career. From B2B to B2C, Mr. Prakash is the go-to, so to speak. If you don't believe in the role of marketing, this podcast might convince you otherwise. And if you love marketing and want to understand more, this podcast is for you as well. I'm your host, Akshaya Shankar.
And I'm Rashmi Sriraghavan. And let's get started. Welcome, Prakash.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hey, glad you're here. So let's get started with our first question. Is B2B marketing any different from B2C marketing?
At a very fundamental level, I don't see a difference in the approaches we would take for B2C or B2B. First things first, we must remember that in both, whether it be B2B or B2C, we are dealing with human beings. The buyer at the other end is a human being. And B2B decisions are very much taken by people in flesh and blood like you and me, and not by computers or automatons or Excel sheets. They are human decisions which are being made. Really, that's the fundamental reason why there is not that much of a difference in an approach for B2B or B2C. In both cases, we are trying to do the exact same thing, right? We're trying to persuade an audience to choose our offering over that of the competition. And to do that, we have to choose the right segment. We have to create a great product in terms of design, features, and packaging. We have to decide on optimal pricing that gives us sales and margins. We have to position that offering persuasively. And then we have to communicate this powerfully so that the audience know about the product, understand it, like what they understand, perhaps buy it and even recommend this product to others. So at a very fundamental level, as a marketing person, I don't see a difference between the two. I mean, I would approach them pretty similarly.
But we do hear that in B2B marketing, we have to provide for longer sales cycles, multiple stakeholders, rational decision making, etc. So is that not a difference?
Hey, some of these things could happen in B2C as well. So let's say you're buying a car. You don't go to a shop and say, please pack a car and give it, right? It could take a long time because you're going through multiple options. You're trying to please everybody in your house. Somebody drives the car, somebody else is the passenger. You want safety for your kids. You want boot space. People have different opinions on colors, and you have budget constraints. You have different brands to buy from. So it could well be a decision which you take over several months, right? And it could involve multiple stakeholders. Similarly, many children's products could involve multiple influencers, right? The child is the user. A teacher could be an influencer. The parent could be the buyer. So where the user, decision maker, buyer could be all quite different. Often this is because of the nature of the categories themselves and higher ticket sizes involved. So it's really not a B2B versus B2C thing, but more because of the nature of the category. But yes, when you ask, there is one big difference that is worth keeping in mind in many of the cases. So that difference relates to the mindset of the respective audiences, the mindset of a typical B2B audience and the B2C audience. And this relates to the nature of the incentives in the buying decision. And these can be quite different for B2B and B2C. Let me explain what I'm trying to say. So in B2C, the buyer evaluates the offering very often in terms of the benefits that will accrue to them if the product does what it promises to do. Right? So I'm imagining myself with whiter clothes or brighter pictures or tastier pizza or sparkling bathrooms or stylish haircuts, better looks and exciting holidays and smart kids and so on. Right? So when I'm evaluating a product, I'm saying, okay, this is what it's going to do for me. The incentives for the B2B buyer are not quite so direct. Right? So while the buyer does imagine the benefits of a successful purchase, efficient production or faster computation or better employees or more cash in hand, cheaper raw materials, they also place an inordinate focus on the price of failure. In a B2B transaction, the benefits of success accrue to the organization more than the individual, right? But the price of failure, at least in the mind of that individual, is often borne by the individual themselves, right? at least in reputational terms. You feel that if I make a mistake here, this is going to cost me a lot in reputational terms. So, which is why we often tend to associate longer sales cycles, committee decisions. We try to get more and more people involved in the decision. A lot of back and forth. So it's not uncommon to have a situation where you go and have a set of great meetings, and you can speak to our sales teams and they'll tell you this. You have a set of great meetings, great presentations with the prospective buyer. Everything seems hunky-dory, and then suddenly the trail goes cold. The buyer often is paralyzed by this fear of failure rather than by the upsides of the success, resulting in delays, right? Therefore, you see in B2B, the requirement for hand-holding, relationship building, and trust-creating measures becomes very, very critical. This is not to say that it doesn't happen in B2C. It happens often enough in high-ticket purchases like real estate, automobiles, etc. But there too, the impending pleasures can help one override the perceived risks. So in B2B, the risks of failure become a very, very important incentive for people to take decisions one way or the other. While in B2C, the pleasures of success are the larger incentive. So that's one difference which I would say exists a lot between B2B and B2C.
Prakash sir, you mentioned how this is a more broad view of B2B, right? But there's actually a lot of diversity in the businesses that are there in reality, in their sizes, in their organization of leadership. So I just wanted to ask you, since most businesses in India are small businesses, where typically there's only one key decision maker, would this apply to them as well?
Great question. So one could always say that, look, in a one-man show or a one-person show, B2B and B2C kind of merges. It's one person after all. But strangely, in B2B selling to MSMEs as well, one finds that this does apply. While an MSME owner may not have many colleagues to contend with, they'll have colleagues, but they're far too junior, they're far too aloof from them for them to really matter in reputational terms. They're equally worried about their rest of their ecosystem, their professional reputations in the context of their own suppliers, their important clients, their competitors, because it is a community. So we find that people are very careful about managing their reputation with this ecosystem. So therefore, we might find it's easier to sell a phone at a very high price than to sell an office automation product at half the price to an MSM. Simply because in one, they're evaluating themselves in terms of what will people think if this doesn't work, while for an individual purchase, they pretty much don't care what people think up to a level, in the sense that they could always change that decision whimsically or not tell people and so on.
So speaking of MSMEs, in what ways would B2B marketing really differ compared to the strategies that we would employ for, say, larger companies?
Okay, it's in the nature of the structure, in the sense that for most MSMEs, the business is the owner and the owner is the business, right? It's usually a single person or a very small group of people who decide everything. So one may expect that things actually get done faster when you're selling to MSMEs. However, there are a number of other factors which come into play which bring about delays and slow decision making and things getting dragged along and so on. So one of the things is, when we talk about SMEs, a lot of them do not like to be categorized as small, because especially by sellers who are larger than them, right? So they don't like being patronized by knowledgeable outsiders, especially from larger companies. So there's always an air of caution and sometimes even suspicion that, why is this person talking down to me, or is this person trying to push something to me which I don't really need? So there is a sense of suspicion. So people tread very, very carefully. Also, if you see the life of an MSME, you always feel very jammed, and controlled by a lot of external factors. Your clients, your financiers, your suppliers, your regulations. And it's every day is like a crisis very often, which often adds to this feeling of unease while dealing with something new. You have so much of stuff to deal with on a day-to-day basis, which is has your back already to the wall. And when you're dealing with something new, you want to see, tread very, very carefully. You don't want another headache to be taken on board. So there is a certain sense of professional loneliness with an MSME. And so therefore, this trust building becomes very, very important. Decisions can get quite delayed simply because it's one man show. Because you have so many things to decide on, so many issues which you're trying to deal with, that your tendency towards dealing with anything new is you're very careful, and very often you just postpone your decisions because you have something more important to do at that point in time.
Moving a little ahead, in B2B marketing, ROI is crucial. So, how do you really measure and evaluate the effectiveness of your marketing efforts? And what metrics or KPIs, do you find most valuable while demonstrating success, for instance?
The ROI is important in any business investment or expense, not just in marketing. See, ROI is very often a result and a useful measure of success for all the efforts we've made over a period of time. From a marketing perspective, what we constantly need to measure are all the things that we feel will give us that ROI. Right? So what do I mean by this? That is, so in marketing, the challenge is really about knowing what to measure. What happens often, especially in this digital age, that we end up measuring what's easy to measure. Where I have the data, I'll measure that. But sometimes what we measure can be quite irrelevant or less relevant. What we need to figure out is first what to measure, the must have rather than the nice to have.
Then, how do we set up the right metrics? Is there a good way of thinking about it?
It would differ for every company and depend on the stage of evolution you are in. But fundamentally, it would be something like this. So we are looking to achieve, you start with a set of business numbers you need in a period, say in a year or a 3-year period, both or whatever. Right? You have revenues, profits, and your market share, and your product mix, and so on. So these are kind of, at a strategic level, kind of decided by the company at what your business objectives might be. To set up relevant metrics in marketing, we can start from the basics. We spoke about marketing outcomes being a function of getting people to know, understand, like, buy, and recommend. Okay, so while marketing activities could cover all these, our objectives and competitive standing will define where our focus might be. And we measure what is appropriate. So just to give you an example, if I'm a relatively new company, we might want to start out by measuring how we have moved the needle on salience or a contextual awareness of who we are amongst our audience. Right? So we may say that, look, we started out this business and most people really didn't know us. But it's very important for more and more of our audience to know and recognize that, okay, here is a company which does reasonably or decent business in this particular area. And as a first step, we need to make a move on that. We need to know that at the end of 6 months or a year, there is an X% movement in that, because that's the most fundamental basis for everything else, which is awareness. Right? And when I say awareness, I mean a contextual awareness, in the sense that where people have heard of you and they know in what context you operate. Right? Not just knowing a brand name. So it depends on your stage of evolution. So similarly, moving forward, you could say that, okay, I need to measure levels of awareness if I'm a relatively new company. I might also want to measure how well people have understood what I sell. Right? How well people are able to play back to me the benefits, whether they be rational benefits, emotional benefits of what I'm trying to sell to them. So I might set up some ways of measuring that. It can often be the case that people have heard of us but don't quite understand what we do, and we see this sometimes in new age consumer products. So, for instance, there was for a long time there was this popular brand of I think this company which was giving rewards for paying credit card bills through them. Everybody heard of them, right? Because they had this kind of campaign and so on. But quite a few people I spoke to from the initial period didn't know exactly how it worked and what they did. And that probably was by design, because they just wanted more and more people to know about them at that time, right? So, but at the next stage, you need more and more people to also recognize and understand what you do. Depending on your cycle, so you decide whether to measure how much people know you, or whether they've understood what you do, or you could then go on to measure how much people like you. And then, of course, how many people buy you. So you could set up your metrics depending on where you are on this continuum. I'm not going to point out 4 metrics which you need to measure, because it would really, I mean, the metrics themselves are common sense. The larger point I'm making is you need to decide what is more important for you, at which, and measure that more faithfully than what is easily available to measure. I mean, sales figures are the easiest things to measure, but they are a post facto, number, right? What you need to measure is a whole host of things which will lead to that sale, right? So that you can take corrective action quicker than waiting for the end of the year and saying, okay, this was our sale and so on. So before I measure that sale, I need to know how many people actually liked me. And before that, I need to know how many people actually understood me. And before that, I need to know how many people actually even knew that I exist, right? So each one of these would point towards a different metric to measure.
So in a sense, strategy defines metrics and the measures themselves then suggest strategic course correction. So what about metrics for existing customer relationships then?
Yeah, that's absolutely critical, because, one thing is to get a customer in, and in B2B and actually even in B2C, the real money you make very often is in ongoing business, right? Especially if your business is dependent on people buying again and again. So in a typical fast-moving consumer product, or in a product like ours, which is trade credit, right? Our real success comes in long-term continuous business, right? Because every time a customer does a transaction to us, we make some money. So therefore, to keep a customer becomes very, very important. And therefore, measuring what it will take to keep our customers happy and loyal to us is very, very critical. So measuring what customers think, especially in a competitive market when you have multiple products to sell to the same customer, is, as I said, very important. Even if our customers are happy with us, and very often we know they're happy with us because they shower us with more business, the way they talk to us and so on, but we need to know exactly why. We may assume that they're happy with us for reason X, but actually it could be for something else totally. So in our own case, we discovered that while customers love our features, our ease of use, our absolutely robust technology, and we have some fantastic technology products, right? At the end of the day, the kind of downtimes we have are so ridiculously low, and that, people love us. They always know that if nothing else, Vayana is going to work, right? But what they really love about us is the fact that we get their business. Is our understanding, is the fact that they feel they're speaking with experts who understand this whole credit business, right? That we get trade credit, in a manner of speaking. And as a result of it, the kind of ownership and commitment we show in the relationship comes not just from being there for the customer, but being very good advisors and being able to provide counsel when required. Remember, especially in technology products, everything is replicable in a short span of time. If somebody else is doing it, I can also, copy it and do it soon. So I might get a head start for doing something for the first time, but others can catch up fairly quickly. What is more difficult to replicate is this. Some of the other aspects of why exactly people want to do business with us. So we need to also set up metrics for that, to understand the nature of the relationship with the customer.
The more I understand this, I feel like there is now more to know and more to uncover. So to really dig deep further into this idea of having, the quote unquote right KPIs for each context, the next question that comes to my mind is, what kind of money, people, infrastructure would one need to measure all of this?
So I think the most critical decision is figuring out what to measure, right? Money is often a circumstantial thing, right? So once I know what I have to measure, I will prioritize depending on how much money I have and what kind of infrastructure I have, right? Or what I can afford. So if I'm a small startup, let's say, I may not have the kind of money to do a lot of research or have a lot of analytics subscriptions and things like that to do everything I want to do. So I might spend on one or two of those things. I might consciously decide to do something less robust in some of the other areas. But the important thing is to know what to measure. right? And that's like half the job done. And then we can do what we can afford. So we can begin with things as rudimentary as dipsticks. If you can't afford more fancy analytics. Say we participated in a convention and set up a stall somewhere. Do the people who passed by that stall remember us a week later? Now, this may seem not particularly robust, but it gives us a sense of what is happening, right? That we put out some communication somewhere. We saw a bunch of kind of connected people, and then we figured out that a week later they do remember something about us, or there is something in the conversation, or they don't. So it gives us a quick sense of where we are on a regular basis. If, for instance, they do remember some of the things we told them, should we do more of the same? If not, do we need to change something? All of these, even rudimentary, sometimes rudimentary bits of research, which we can do on a day-to-day basis, during just through conversation with clients, prospects, and the ecosystem at large, can help us. And even that counts as research, right? So, and then we can move on to using technology or external agencies or something, which in the initial stages we may not be able to afford.
I think it does make a lot of sense and gives us something to really think about as well. So, just coming back to the comparison with B2C. In B2C, we hear a lot about brand building, and somehow in B2B, we tend to speak more about products. So, is brand less important than in B2B?
Yeah, in a sense, I actually feel it's still more important. So it's true that in B2B, the concept of brand does not quite have the exalted status that is enjoyed in B2C. Because from a business point of view, it really matters a lot. If you look at in any B2B category, the leaders in most categories actually tend to charge more than their competitors. Not because their products are better, but because their products are believed to be better than others. So in physical terms, they may be at parity. All of us would have heard that old saying, nobody got fired for buying IBM. So this idea of brand creates a safety for the buyer. Not just, not just because they think it's safer to buy, because they feel, look, it's a shared belief. The whole world thinks they are safer to buy, right? If I buy this brand. So, and we've already established that, this safety is a very important incentive in B2B buying. That people feel that, look, nobody should blame me for a wrong decision. So the more powerful the brand I am buying, the safer I tend to feel, because it's not just me. The whole world thinks it's a safe choice. It's a better choice, right? So brand building to me is very, very critical in B2B. Even from a day-to-day selling point of view, it's very critical.
That's a fair point, but I still want to clarify further. Now, whether for right or wrong, once we're knee deep in the daily marketing operations, the focus does seem to be a lot on performance marketing and not on brand building. Why is that so? Is it because ROI is so critical?
Actually, brand building is critical to ROI. For better results or better performance, if I want to use that word, is possible only when your brand is stronger. So, and this is the so-called ROI is at the heart of this performance marketing. But the basis for better performance is a stronger brand. So, in that sense, the two are very, very closely linked. Just as an aside, marketing has always been about performance. So, I find this term a little strange and it's used as if it's a new thing. It's simple, right? People do business with people they're familiar with. People do business with people they like, right? And brand building gets people to know you and like you, in a certain sense, buy into you, which makes it easier for them to buy you, right? So if that happens, you'll see better results in a lead generation mailer or a cold call, or you put up a enclosure in an exhibition, and you will find more people coming to you. That's because, in a certain sense, they already are primed about you. They are aware that you exist. They have heard some nice things about you, and then when they hear you speaking, they are interested to listen to you. Right? So businesses that focus on brand building get better results and get better ROI. Period.
I think now that we've covered significant ground on metrics and ROI, I'd like to move on a little bit onto communication. So we usually see that B2B advertising is a bit dry, very business-like, almost boring. So does B2B also have to be boring to boring?
So like B2B buyers, sometimes it rubs off on B2B sellers as well. You have this tendency to play safe, and I hear use safe within quotes. So there is a comfort in overloading communication to every feature that can be shown and making your communication look more like a catalog, right? Forgetting why you're doing the communication in the first place. And then we all wonder why it doesn't work. Or just like in any category, business communication also needs to do the same things. I need to draw attention. I need to tell a good story. I need to tell it memorably. I need to provoke an emotion, right? In a competitive context, it's very crucial to make your communication stand out. Be it a mailer, an ad, a post, a sales pitch, a stall design, whatever. If you do exactly what your competitors are doing, or if you do something where, which doesn't really stand out and which feels very safe, in which there's nothing wrong, but there's not much right either, how can you expect to nudge customers out of their comfort zones and start talking to you? We must remind ourselves that our audience is human, and the job of marketing communication is to persuade, right? And rational logic is only one way of persuasion. Emotional logic is equally important to get a response. I think the reason why a lot of B2B is boring is because you try to be as safe as your customer. So as a result, doing anything new, is stepping out of your comfort zone. You don't want to do anything which somebody will say, but this is not the way it's done usually. But the very problem is that if you do stuff the way it is done usually, it will give you the same old results, right? So it's important to constantly remind ourselves that we need to be able to step out of that. We need to be able to do communication that is fresh, provocative, interesting for people to look at and respond. And touch upon the right kind of emotions. Emotion doesn't always mean make people cry, right? You could make people feel awe about what you do. You could make people feel fear sometimes that, okay, am I missing out on something? You could make people feel just full of wonder as to, oh, this is how things work, right? So the moment you provoke an emotion, even in B2B, you will provoke a response. Okay, and that response may not always be a reply to you, but a response could be, hey, these guys are interesting. And when the time comes, I will reach out.
So from all of this, all our questions so far, one thing that I'm able to get from this is it seems that marketers need to combine skills that intuitively don't sit with each other. Like on one hand, we need to know business and numbers. And on the other hand, we need to have this, more nebulous creative side. So what do you make of that?
Yeah, and that's exactly what makes the marketing role very challenging. But that's also exactly what makes it very enjoyable, right? Both sides of your mind, the logic side, the creative or the magic side, they need to work in tandem with each other. So almost by definition, what you do for your brand must not work for some other brand, right? And what you've done in the past will not work in the future, right? Because you need to be fresh, you need to be new. You need to move people out of their comfort zones to do business with you. So we need both the structure and rigor in the strategy, and then this needs to translate into fresh, differentiated execution, whether it's in overall ideas or in very specific creative work. So sometimes we tend to think that making the right media choice is enough for results. We say, okay, the response to everything is, okay, send a mailer or let's do search marketing or something like that. Often ignoring the fact that what will set us apart is really what we put into those media, which is the content and the way we shape the content, which is really going to create an impact in the hearts and minds of buyers.
Thank you so much for shedding light on various aspects on the commonalities and the differences between B2B and B2C, the significance of brand building, the importance of ROI. I feel like all of this has really given us quite a bit to think about. And as we wrap up this episode of the Voices of Vayana podcast, we hope that our listeners have gained valuable insights into marketing. We'd like to express our gratitude to Mr. Prakash once again, and of course to our wonderful listeners. Thank you for joining. Stay tuned for more engaging discussions on various topics in the world of business and beyond. Until next time.